Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Timeline Divergence. I am your host, The Drifter, and in this series, we explore the ultimate what-ifs of history, uncovering the lost technologies, forgotten civilizations, and parallel realities that could have been. Today, we are looking at a world where the brilliant mind of Nikola Tesla was never silenced. Imagine a modern reality in the year 2026. The sky is completely clear. It is not cluttered with miles of ugly, heavy cables. Close your eyes and picture a sprawling metropolis. There are no massive coal plants choking the atmosphere with thick smoke. There are no oil spills turning the oceans into toxic wastelands. There are no monthly electric bills arriving in your mailbox to drain your wealth. In this alternate present, humanity unlocked the ultimate secret of the universe. Every home, every massive factory, and every sleek vehicle draws pure power silently from the ambient electric field of the Earth itself. It is a true paradise of limitless energy. The air you breathe is remarkably crisp and clean. The vast cities are profoundly quiet. A small, elegant receiver antenna sits in the corner of your room. It hums softly. It glows with a warm, gentle light. It pulls electricity directly from the thin air around you. Your devices never lose charge. Your life is never tethered to a wall outlet. This is not magic. This is pure applied physics. In this glorious timeline, the monumental Wardenclyffe project was fully realized. The natural electromagnetic resonance of the planet became an infinite battery for all of mankind. If Tesla succeeded, we would never know what a gas station is. Global conflicts over fuel would be a completely alien concept. We would definitely be exploring the outer planets by now. Poverty driven by resource scarcity would be entirely eradicated. They harvest the invisible, majestic waves of the Earth. We dig dirty holes in the ground to burn ancient, toxic sludge. They built a society of absolute abundance. We inherited a world of strict, artificial limits. But that beautiful timeline was abruptly buried. But that timeline died in the year 1905. Let us travel back to the exact moment the timeline fractured. We are standing on the edge of a high cliff in the quiet village of Shoreham on Long Island. It is a gray, overcast afternoon in late autumn. The salt air is cold and biting against your skin, carrying the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. You can hear the heavy, rhythmic crashing of the Atlantic waves against the jagged rocks far below. The sound is a constant, low roar that vibrates through the soles of your leather boots. Rising above you, piercing the leaden sky like a wooden titan, is the Wardenclyffe Tower. It is a massive, skeletal pyramid built of thick beams of dark timber, capped with a giant, shimmering copper dome that spans nearly 70 feet across. The air around the tower is not still. It is alive. It is heavy with a presence you can feel before you even see it. As you step closer to the base of the structure, you feel a deep, low-frequency vibration in the very marrow of your bones. It is not a noise you hear with your ears, but a resonance you feel in your chest. This is the sound of the massive Westinghouse generators spinning deep in the brick powerhouse nearby. They are humming with the power of 10,000 horses. There's a sharp, metallic scent of ozone filling your lungs with every breath. It is the smell of a coming lightning storm, concentrated and held captive by human hands. If you reach out your hand toward the wooden supports, the hair on your arms stands up instantly. You can feel the invisible tension in the atmosphere. Tiny, harmless sparks of blue static electricity dance between your fingertips and the cold metal railings. Above you, the great copper dome begins to glow with a soft, ethereal, violet light. This is the brush discharge, a crown of violet fire that Tesla called the St. Elmo fire of the future. You are standing at the heart of the greatest machine ever conceived by a human mind. This was meant to be the first of many world stations, a global network that would link every human being on the planet into a single, pulsing web of information and energy. Nikola Tesla stands in the shadow of his creation, a solitary figure draped in a long black overcoat. He is tall, thin, and his eyes carry the weight of 1,000 futures. He moves with a quiet, calculated precision, checking the dials on a massive mahogany control panel. To the world outside, this tower is marketed as a radio station, a way to send telegrams across the ocean without the need for expensive underwater cables. But to Tesla, this tower is a key. It is a giant tuning fork for the planet itself. According to his complex theories, the Earth is not just a rock floating in space. It is a giant spherical capacitor. It is a natural generator that is constantly being charged by the solar winds and the movements of the atmosphere. By pumping a specific, high-frequency current into the ground through a massive system of iron pipes reaching hundreds of feet into the bedrock, Tesla believed he could tap into the natural resonance of the planet. He intended to make the entire globe vibrate at a specific frequency. Once the Earth was singing in harmony with his tower, the air itself would become a conductor. This would allow anyone, anywhere, to stick a simple metal rod into the dirt and pull out free, limitless electricity. Imagine the sheer audacity of this vision. A farmer in the middle of a desert, a sailor in the center of the ocean, or a miner deep in a mountain could all access the same power as a factory owner in New York. There would be no need for wires. There would be no need for meters. There would be no way to turn the power off once it was started. It was the ultimate gift to a developing world, a democratization of energy that would have bypassed every gatekeeper of the 20th century. However, the shadow cast by the tower was not the only thing growing in the year 1905. The financial backers in the boardrooms of Manhattan were watching the progress with a growing sense of unease. J.P. Morgan, the titan of industry and the most powerful financier in the world, had provided the initial funding of $150,000. At first, he saw it as a lucrative investment in the future of radio communication. He wanted to dominate the airwaves, just as he dominated the railroads and the steel mills. But as the tower grew higher and Tesla became more open about his true ambitions, the realization of the project's real potential began to sink in. Surviving records suggest an inherent structural conflict where the potential for absolute abundance was viewed as a direct threat to the established mechanisms of resource control. They likely feared absolute chaos. They would have dreaded the collapse of their entire global hierarchy. They were men who built their empires on the scarcity of resources. They owned the copper mines that produced the wire for electric grids. They owned the coal mines that fueled the power plants. They owned the very land that the infrastructure sat upon. A world with free energy is a world where you cannot control the borders. You cannot tax the sun, or the wind, or the very vibrations of the earth beneath a man's feet. If energy is free and accessible to all, the primary lever of social and economic controls disappears. A world of absolute abundance is a world where the masses no longer depend on the masters of industry for their basic survival. The threat was not just to their bank accounts, but to the very concept of centralized power. Official explanations from the period claim that Tesla simply ran out of money due to his own poor management, and that the project was a scientific dead end that could never work. They paint him as a mad scientist who lost his grip on reality. But the data suggests a much darker, more calculated reality. The sudden evaporation of capital remains one of the most chilling anomalies of history, where every major door in New York and London simply ceased to open for a vision that challenged the very laws of scarcity. When Tesla approached other investors, he found the doors of every major bank in New York and London firmly shut. It was as if a silent order had been issued to let the project wither on the vine. Tesla pleaded with Morgan in a series of increasingly desperate letters. He explained that the tower was nearly ready, that the world was on the brink of a new era, but the silence from the Morgan Empire was deafening. By the year 1906, the workmen were sent home. The massive generators grew cold and silent. The violet glow on the copper dome faded into the gray mist of the Atlantic. The tower stood as a silent, wooden ghost for over a decade, a monument to a future that was being actively erased. By the year 1917, the tower was no longer seen as a beacon of hope. It was officially declared a security risk. Under the guise of national security, during the height of the First World War, the government ordered its destruction. They claimed that German spies could use the massive structure as a landmark or a radio post. But we must ask ourselves, was it the enemy abroad they feared, or the revolutionary technology within? You can almost feel the ground shake even now as the dynamite charges tear through the massive wooden legs of the pyramid. You can hear the horrific, high-pitched screeching of the massive copper dome as it twists and buckles under its own weight, crashing into the dirt with a sound like a dying god. The dream was sold for scrap metal to pay off the debts of Tesla. The iron pipes were pulled from the ground. The blueprints were scattered or seized. The timeline was officially and violently severed. We were forced back into a world of coal, oil, and limited horizons. We were led away from the vibratory harmony of the earth and into a century of burning, digging, and fighting for every watt of power we consumed. The destruction of the Wardenclyffe Tower was not just the loss of a building, it was the assassination of a future. If the timeline had held, the 20th century would not have been defined by the roar of internal combustion engines and the black smoke of heavy industry. It would have been the era of the Great Resonance. To understand the profound shift, we must look at the deep mechanism of Tesla's plan. He did not want to create energy. He wanted to harvest the energy that already exists within the very fabric of our planet. Tesla viewed the Earth as a living, breathing electrical circuit. Between the surface of the ground and the high reaches of the ionosphere, there is a constant, massive electrical tension of hundreds of thousands of volts. This is a river of power that has been flowing since the world was formed. Tesla's technology was designed to act as a bridge. By setting up a global network of towers, he would have essentially turned the entire atmosphere into a high-speed data and power lane. Imagine the immediate consequences for the global economy. In our current timeline, the 20th century was dictated by the petrodollar. We saw the rise of massive oil cartels and the total dependence of every nation on a few volatile regions of the world. But if the Wardenclyffe system had succeeded, the concept of a fuel crisis would be a historical absurdity. If power is pulled from the air and the ground at any location on the globe, the geopolitical value of oil drops to zero. The massive tankers that currently clog our shipping lanes would never have been built. The sprawling refineries that poison our coastlines would be replaced by small, silent resonance stations. Think of the physical experience of this lost world. In their reality, transportation is entirely decoupled from the explosion. Our world is loud. Every car, every bus, and every airplane is essentially a series of controlled explosions contained within metal shells. Their world is defined by a haunting, majestic silence. Their trains do not burn diesel. They glide on tracks of magnetic levitation, powered by the invisible pulse of the earth. Their aircraft are not massive tubes filled with flammable kerosene. They are sleek, silent vessels that draw energy from the ionosphere, capable of traveling at speeds we can only dream of without ever needing to refuel. The visual landscape of their cities is fundamentally different. We live in a world of scars. We dig deep into the crust of the planet to extract coal and gas. We strip mine mountains and leave behind toxic craters. Their cities are built in harmony with the natural environment. Without the need for massive power grids and heavy infrastructure, their architecture is lighter, more organic. They did not need to clear-cut forests for power lines. They did not need to dam every wild river for hydroelectricity. They simply tuned into the frequency of the planet, Contrast the air we breathe with the air in the year 2026 of the lost timeline. We have spent over a century pumping billions of tons of carbon and heavy metals into the sky. We have darkened our horizons and warmed our oceans. In their timeline, the air is as clear and sharp as it was 1,000 years ago. The sky at night is a brilliant, unobstructed tapestry of stars because they have no need for the massive, inefficient light pollution of our primitive electric grids. Their lighting is cold, efficient, and powered by the ambient field. A street lamp in their world is not a bulb connected to a wire. It is a vacuum tube that glows with the natural energy of the atmosphere. The most profound change, however, is not technical. It is psychological. We live in a world of artificial scarcity. We are taught from birth that energy is expensive, that resources are limited, and that we must compete with our neighbors for survival. This mindset fuels our wars and our anxieties. But in the timeline of the Great Resonance, the dominant mindset is one of absolute abundance. When the basic needs of warmth, light, and movement are met for free, the very foundation of human greed begins to crumble. If this technology existed, the global banking system as we know it would have been obliterated by the mid-20th century. You cannot base a currency on a resource that is available to everyone for free. The centralization of wealth that we see in our world today would be mathematically impossible. They built a society where the brilliance of the mind was the only true currency. We built a society where the ownership of the ground is the only way to survive. Mandatory sensory details flood this alternate existence. Imagine walking down a street in this parallel New York. There is no smell of exhaust. There is only the scent of blooming gardens and the ozone of the clean air. You do not hear the constant grinding machinery of a city under stress. Instead, you hear a very faint, musical hum. It is a low, soothing note that resonates in the air, the sound of a planet working in perfect concert with its inhabitants. In every home, there is a small polished stone or a crystal receiver sitting on a shelf. It does not look like a machine. It looks like a piece of art, but it glows with a soft, warm light, and it provides all the power required for a family to thrive. We are told that our current path was the only logical way forward. We are told that the internal combustion engine and the nuclear reactor were the heights of human achievement. But when you look at the logic of the resonance, our timeline looks like a primitive, desperate struggle. We are like children burning our furniture to keep the house warm, while a giant glowing sun sits just outside our window. We chose the fire. They chose the light. We are left standing in the ruins of a future that never was. Looking back at the scorched remains of the Wardenclyffe Tower, we must confront a chilling truth. We do not live in this stunted, struggling reality because of a lack of genius or a failure of the laws of physics. The science was sound. The math was verified. The vision was nearly complete. What if humanity did not miss out on this future because the technology was flawed? What if we missed out because those in power chose a timeline where profit and control outweighed human progress? We are taught to believe in the steady, inevitable march of improvement. We are told that the best ideas always win. But history is not a meritocracy. It is a battlefield of interests. The story of Nikola Tesla is not a tragedy of a man who failed. Perhaps it is the tragedy of a species that was redirected. We were led away from the garden of infinite energy and into the desert of endless consumption. We were taught to pay for the light while the sun was hidden behind a curtain of industrial smoke. Every time you pay an electric bill, every time you see a war fought over a patch of oil-rich sand, you are feeling the phantom pain of that severed timeline. We are the orphans of the Great Resonance, living in a world of artificial limits that were imposed upon us over a century ago. The tower is gone. The copper dome was melted down. The genius who dreamed it died alone in a hotel room. His papers seized by agents of a government that claimed to be protecting us. But the frequency of the earth remains. The resonance is still there, vibrating beneath our feet, waiting for a generation brave enough to listen again? What if we do not lack the technology to save our world? What if we simply lack the will to challenge the architects of our current darkness? T. What do you think about this lost timeline? Is it possible that the greatest invention in human history was discarded simply because it could not be metered and sold? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If you found this journey through our stolen history thought-provoking, please hit the like button and subscribe to Timeline Divergence for more uncovering of the paths we never took. Until next time, stay curious and keep watching the timelines.